Welcome to Tell Me a Story. I'm Adina Samuels, and I'm inviting anyone and everyone to share their stories with me. Let's see what we get. Ron Monteiro, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Adina. I'm excited as well.
So, before we get started on hearing your story, can you tell me a little about yourself?
Yeah, so I moved from Kenya to Canada when I was a teenager. So I went through some trials and tribulations learning how to adjust to the Canadian environment. And then I went into school and I did accounting. And, frankly, I just did it because I was pretty good at math. And I ended up taking a 20-year career in finance and accounting. And I ended up working at some great companies which helped me explore my potential. So Kraft Foods, for example, being pretty great. And then about 3 years ago, I felt that I had enough of that career and I started my own business, training, speaking. And then I'm glad to say I partnered with you and we just published a book. So, lots of different chapters in that story, but that's the high level. And on a personal level, massive soccer fan. I got beautiful family, two kids and a wife, and love traveling. So that's a little bit about myself.
Amazing. I love it. And I feel really grateful that our paths crossed and we could create that beautiful book behind you over there together, which I'm sure we'll
Right
talk
here.
about a little bit more. So, Ron, as you know, the one prerequisite that every guest on this show has is to come with a story. It can be anything about life, love, fashion, passion, whatever it is. So, what is yours?
Yeah, so my story is a little bit about adversity, right, and how to deal with adversity. So I'll tell you the story. So a few years ago, right around the time where I was thinking about a new career, a friend of mine, his name's Thomas, and he just got promoted to the CEO of the company that he was working at. He had told me how amazing the environment was. He had made some changes. He had a new lease on life. And he said, look, I'm now looking for a CFO. And he said, are you interested in applying? And I was like, for sure. I really was excited and I was already kind of thinking about how we would work together and conquer the world, so to speak. So I
This was
embarked on,
pre your business days,
this was pre my
obviously. Yeah.
business. Yeah, this was probably in that space between my current business and my some of my roles. And I was still working, so I had a job at the time. But so I went through the first set of interviews and I met with the owner's son and the HR leader, and they went exceptionally well, like 2 3 hour interviews at times. So then I got another call from Thomas and he said, look, congratulations, you moved to the final round. So it was myself and one other person, but I had a final stage, which was a meeting with the owner of the company, and I was late. I was late. And
Oh,
and I'm like, I'm almost never late for anything, but I just somehow misjudged it. Like, shit happens, right? And
like
so
how late are we talking, Ron? Like
I ended
five
up being
minutes?
5 minutes late. Like, I mean, but
Okay.
for me, I would generally want to be there 15 to 30 minutes early.
Mm,
But
mm-hmm.
instead, I was just stressed as heck. I was driving like I shouldn't be driving. And I finally got to the Sunset Grill on Dundas Road and storm in there and I find him sitting at the table. So I'm already in this like negative mindset saying, shit, how did
Yeah.
I?
Why is it that on those most important days, it has to be that's the day that you're late, you know?
Yeah. And it was unique. So I went in there with like, okay, how do I compose myself? And the good thing was I'm at the point now, I'm like, shit, I can't do anything about it. Just do your best. And I ended up having a great conversation with him. Probably lasted a couple hours. It's not like he left and said, screw this guy. Like, but anyway, so we had a great conversation, left it at that, and I felt pretty good by the end of it. It was still a nagging, I didn't do my best in terms of getting there on time, but in the interview itself, fantastic conversation. So I still felt I was in good stead. And then a couple weeks go by, and I'm driving on Credit View Road. I'm telling you that the reason I'm telling you that is I got the phone call, I saw Thomas's name on it, and I was like, I got excited. And right away, he's like, "Hi, Ron." Like it was a very muted hello, and
Oof.
instantaneously I knew what was coming. And he said, "Hey, Ron, we've decided to go in a different direction. Thank you very much." It was a very formal call, where me and him are good buddies, right? So
Yeah.
right away, it's like it was one of those like it almost felt like we didn't know each other. So I was like, "Oh, thank you," and I was really disappointed. My heart literally sank, and for 6 months, every time I hit that spot on Credit View Road, I would feel that. Like I really would.
Ugh.
So anyway, long story short, like the person who got the job, his name is Jamie, he was actually better suited for the job. Like he was all in on a CFO type career. Whereas when I reflect on my career and where it's gone now, I had a pattern, and I did talk to Thomas. I said, "Hey, what was the reason? Was it I was late, or was it something else?" And he goes, "No, that had nothing to do." He said it was because my recent pattern of jobs was every 2 years I had moved on, 2 years or less, whereas the other candidate had pretty much been stable in his role for many years. So there was a little bit of concern, and probably legitimate, that I was bouncing around. And now, as I reflect on that, it was my journey where I was kind of almost like done with that finance type part of my career, and I was starting to explore different things. And if I rewind and I think, okay, I probably would have gone in guns a blazing, done a great job, but I probably would have hit a plateau when things got stable where I'd want to move on. And look, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I still, you know me, I would have given it my very best.
Of
But
course.
as I reflect years later on that story, it was actually a blessing. Like, I don't think I would have been as good as Jamie, for example, in that role, and I wouldn't have been as happy as he currently is.
Hmm.
And so that's my story. It's like, how do you turn disappointment into excitement? And I was in the dumps after, right? So I'm
How
not saying
long
like,
did that kind of disappointment, the initial disappointment, last?
so like it was pretty heavy initially, and then it was just kind of there. Like for example, when I drive by that street, I'd feel it, and like, but right now it's like if I drive on Credit View Road, I'm not thinking about that, right? So it was there, and it's just another reminder that sometimes we have these tough situations in life, and yes, they're tough, and you want to take that time to get through that piece, but then it's like, okay, another door is going to open, right? Like I used to hate when people say, hey, when one door closes, another opens, but I've started to really try live that out, right? To say, how do we do it? So that's my story.
I have so many things I want to say. The first is that when you said that when you drive past that specific part of the road, you get that like the
Yeah, yeah.
trigger reaction. I have something so similar. So when I was in university, I had like an administrative assistant part-time job at St. Clair West Station. This woman in her apartment, I would go to the station in between my classes like 2 or 3 times a week and do some admin work. It was the worst job I've ever had in my entire life. Like we worked out of this woman's home, and she introduced her husband to me as her assistant. Like the whole thing was weird. I had to wear slippers in the house. I was not happy. And eventually I left. And every time still, and this is what, like 8 years ago. So every time I pass by St. Clair West Station, it's like this breath of relief that I
Yeah,
no
yeah, no.
longer work there. Which those kind of, like, what are they called? Like environmental memories or whatever. Just
Yeah,
they're so real, That trauma really stays with you.
yeah. It almost reminds me, like, you hear a certain song from an era, and it reminds you of what was going on at the time. But yeah, I know, totally feel that.
Exactly. I want to talk about the role of time in like healing. Like I think in the moment, your devastation was at an all-time low, and like this was what you thought you wanted the most. And again, like people were telling you, don't worry, there's something good around the corner. But when you're in the thick of that devastating feeling, it's like, this is the only thing that exists for me right now.
Yes.
And then now, years later, you can look back and say like, oh, it was totally for the best, and thank goodness the cards fell the way that they did.
Yeah.
I struggle with that because the only way that you could have learned that lesson is through time, and that's kind of something that we don't have a lot of control over. You know what I mean? Like if someone says just wait, I'm like, no,
Yeah.
but what do I do? Right? So those
Yeah,
are, yeah,
no.
I don't know, it's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, no. So interestingly enough, what I've learned about myself is I can accelerate that time. Okay, so there's how do you rebound it, and how do you rebound faster is what popped in my mind when you said that. And so now if I have a disappointment, let's say I pitch to a big client and I do not get the training session, I'm actually able to rebound much faster than I was in the past. And part of it is going back to basics and, hey, talking to a coach or talking to a mentor, talking to a friend. Another strategy I do is like every morning I try to, hey, what am I grateful for? Like it's those little things that can help put you in your best light. And so one of the amazing TED Talks I heard last year, sorry, I heard this gentleman speaking. I'll have to send you his name, but he talked about doing a personal highlights sheet or something for yourself, just to remind yourself of how good you are, right? Because many of us, there's these things called ants, automatic negative thoughts that pop into our mind. So when you go through a tough experience, it's easy to go into that spiral and stay there for a long time. But it's doing the work to get. So I try to do the work to get myself back to a better place. So for example, we'll talk about the book, but I just published the book, and it's now on Amazon. I'm like, what's next? I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a weird feeling. And so now, last few days, I've been like, okay, let me go back to basics and try to get myself motivated for 2025. Because really, I
Because you
was,
feel like you had this big goal, you weren't sure how you were going to accomplish it, and then you just kind of did. And now
I
what?
did. Now what? Like, okay,
Yeah.
what do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's all those cliches about enjoy the journey because the mountaintop is not, it's true,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
but back to your question, I think there is an element we can control to help us get through it in the right amount of time. Like, there's no right, whether it takes 6 months, a year, 2 years, a day. I've been reading a lot about, okay, how do you bounce back faster with little strategies to help yourself get there?
Give me one.
So I've told you, like, so one of the things I try to do now is I'll go out for a walk. Like, I will literally say, okay, I'm not feeling it. Let me just go out for a 20-minute walk. And look, it
Mm.
used to be one of those things that was a necessity. We have a dog. I have to take the dog out, right? Last week, I was like, you know what? It's minus 10 or whatever it is. I'm just going
Mm.
to take the dog out for 2 minutes, but I'm going to do my walk myself because a lot of positive things pop into my mind when I do that. And something I've learned over time. So journaling, walking, reading, things like
That's
that
hard.
help
Like
me.
those are all the things you know you should do. It's like telling a kid to like eat their vegetables. Like
Yeah.
delayed gratification, it's going to work out for you in the long run, but in the moment, it's the last thing I want to do is put on a pair of shoes and a jacket and go for a walk.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I mean, it's not like I'm doing this every day. Like, there's some days where I've been sleeping in. So it's like we're not perfect, and it's about finding that right time to do the work. And again, I think it comes down to a daily routine. And also the other thing I try to do is surround myself with people who are going to help uplift me, right? So when I had challenges in my business when I first started, I would call my coach Wayne, and I'd say, look, I need a tune-up. I would tell him, I need you to help me get out of this funk I'm in. And
Mm.
he's the kind of guy where I end that conversation feeling like I could do anything. So that's another strategy to bounce back. And look, I think the time we spend reflecting and maybe being in the dumps and is helpful, right? Because we have to
Mhm.
explore that piece. I'm not saying avoid that, explore it, but when the right time is to come out of it, there are strategies to get out of faster, I think.
Yeah, some useful strategies that I've found have come from dialectical behavioral therapy. A lot of people know cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, but DBT, I'm totally going to botch the description here, so I'm not even going to try. But it's a little bit different. What it does is it tries to prepare you for the moments when you are in those deep, difficult times,
Yes.
to arm you with strategies to not even like get out of them, but just like manage them in the moment.
Yeah.
So, like my past therapist would be very disappointed in me right now, but I can't seem to remember one. But the idea is like different breathing exercises or recognizing the things
Yes.
around you or whatnot.
Yes.
There's a great book called DBT for Dummies, which like has a ton of strategies that are really cool. But yeah, I think a challenge that I'm facing is like being disciplined enough to do the right thing even when I don't want to.
Yes.
And I wish there was an answer for that.
Yeah, so and I face the same things, right? Like, I know all the things that are going to help me get to where I want to get to. So one of the things I did last year, and it was like September, October, something like that, is I literally had a checklist on my wall saying, here are the 10 things I would love to do every day. As simple as, hey, drink 6 glasses of water or have a smoothie, things like that. And just that very act of putting 30 days on my calendar, all the 10 things, that was by far my most disciplined month.
Hmm.
Yet I didn't do it for the rest of the year. Like I still had a pretty good rest of the year, but I like there's these things that we know that we should do. I mean, you talked about eat vegetables. I got two teenagers. Forget it. The last thing you do is tell them anything because they'll do the opposite. So if
Yeah.
anyone's figured that one out, let me know. But it's for myself. It's like these little things make a huge difference,
Hmm.
and it's probably a good reminder for me to say, hey, let me put down a list of here's the things I want to do in order to do them. Like, it's
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we're amazing, all of us. I'm fantastic at procrastinating, wasting time, not doing it. And then, for example, the book was an interesting one where I would literally carve out 30 minutes a day or more. I would set a timer. No matter what, I'm writing because
Hmm.
I'd committed to a pretty big goal. And
Hmm.
so it's these little strategies in life to say, okay, it's committed. I'm doing it. It's in my calendar. And the more you commit it to other people, one of the things I did when I was struggling with the book is I put a post on LinkedIn. I've written a book. I'm writing a book.
Right.
So in a way, you're putting yourself out there.
I think another thing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but at some point in your solo book writing process, you were like maybe the motivation waned a little bit. We started working together. All of a sudden, we're a team, right? And we
Yes,
have this
yes,
Excel document that we start living by. And,
yeah,
I'm needing pages from you by a certain date. You're needing pages by me. And all of a sudden, we're building something that's bigger than just, in your head or on your, drive. I think that goes back to the having the right kind of people in your corner as well.
yeah. No, and look, I think the way it worked out is you popped into my life. It's like, hey, should we meet? And I think you were asking me about doing my LinkedIn content or something, right?
Yeah.
And somehow I mentioned the book, and you said, hey, that's one of my dreams, and that was huge for me because it just helped pick up my motivation. I was kind of at a standstill. Like I was literally like, okay, I've got a whole bunch of stuff written here, and I think you help take it to the next level. And there's an old saying, hey, that when you commit to something, the universe will conspire to help you, right? And I think you coming in was one of many. I mean, that was probably one of the most important elements of the book to get it to fruition, right? So I
Hmm.
think another strategy there is like when we do hit those plateaus or valleys, look for help, ask for help, right?
Right.
And that was
And to reverse the sentiment or to give it back, your trust in me and your willingness to, really give your work to me to shape into something else, just jump started my business too. So we really, we were both in it for the right reasons, I think, helping each other and
yeah,
helping
and
ourselves.
and it was cool, right? Because at first we didn't know each other well, and I was kind of probably not micromanaging, but I was kind of like really going through it. By the end of it, I was like, okay, I'm sending you a whole bunch. Like I remember I sent that middle section to you, and I was like, where is the rest of it? Like, but you did a great job of just paring it down to, hey, what will the reader like? So
Right.
you know what I mean. I think it was
Yeah.
you genuinely had a passion for it, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah. I have
important.
just photos and photos of sticky notes and red markers and yellow highlighters, and I love that stuff. It's
Hey, I
very
love it too.
exciting. Going back to your story, Ron, are there other moments in your life where, like when when we think about things like regret or looking back, like do you think that everything that's happened to you has been for the best? You know?
I try to look at it that way. I mean, look, I've had many difficult moments in my life, many, right? We all go through lots of ups and downs, but I think for me, it's like all those tough times have shaped me for who I am, right? And there's many times I didn't get a promotion or something challenging happened in my personal life. That unfortunately that's life. It's not just a series of ups. It's like it's lots of ups and downs. So I think I try not to regret anymore like I used to. I was very shy, introverted, conservative when I was right through the end of university, probably into my first years of working. And now, if you look at me, like I'm still introverted, but you would never think, most people would never think that because I just have a commitment to myself to go for it.
Mm.
And, one of the big things I did that has helped me get there is my business. So I started my business. I struggled like crazy the first few months. I mean, you're starting a business, you go through so many moments of doubt and the financial stuff is tough and all that. But there's something about, like, I really believe, even if my business didn't work out in the first little while, I went for it.
Mm.
And And when you go for it, like there's something that just kind of puts that regret thing away from, like you just like, I went for it and I gave it my all. That's
Mm-hmm.
all that, and that's very different for me now versus 4 years ago when I was in a company. So I
Right,
think for me, the
right.
lesson is like when you really put yourself out there, when you go for it, the regret pieces kind of drop. Like I don't feel any regret at this point, like
Mm.
none.
Amazing. It's, I think, yes, we've both started our own businesses, but the stakes for you were a little bit higher. Like, I'm in my 20s, I'm not married, I don't have kids, and I rent a fairly reasonably priced apartment in Toronto. Like, my parents are here, worst case, I move back into the basement. But you were at a position in your life where you had built up this career of what, 20 years,
Yeah.
and you had a family, you had a dog, you had a house, all of those things. It's different, right? Like taking that risk feels weightier.
Yeah, and I can't remember if I've told you the story, but part of it was I started as a side hustle, and so I was doing it kind of like the conservative way, and then I had an inclination that I should tell the HR person that I'm doing a side hustle because I was pretty senior at the company, and I told her, and I was kind of friends with her, and she said, "Get the hell out of here! You're either in or out." So
Mm.
in a way, it wasn't like me making this decision. I was on the path, but my decision was accelerated because because of that moment. And that at that moment, I was like, okay, I gotta go for it.
Right. Like even choosing, you know what, then I'm out. Like I'm gonna do
Yeah,
this thing. That's the burn the boats section. Which I was reading another book, Ron, and that same phrase came up. Maybe you can just tell our listeners about the burn your boats section of the book.
yeah, and there's actually a book called Burn the Bolts. It's pretty recently written out. I can't remember the author, but it's an old concept around when you go into into a different enemy's territory, for example, by boat. Instead of having the boats anchored there ready to go when you leave, you just literally burn the boats, meaning I can't retreat, I can't go back. So in a context of life, it's like, okay, when you start your own business or when you move to a different country or something big, you're going all in. You're not having
Hmm.
one foot on either side, and you're just saying, look, this is the time where there's no plan B. Plan A is what I'm going for, and in wartime, the stories say, hey, I'm gonna die if I have to in order to get there, right? So
Yeah.
that's the way I understand it, but it doesn't have to be as grandiose as that. It's like, hey, what's that moment of commitment to me where you're actually
Yeah.
going for it?
I think that's the hardest part for me, committing, like believing in myself enough or in the idea enough and, saying the words, this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's a
Hey,
tough
but
one.
but let me flip it around, right? So you look at when I was started, I was 45. Okay, you're in your 20s. It's I didn't have the courage in my 20s to do that. I didn't have the, and I don't want to paint it as courage like in that way. I just mean I didn't have the experience, the knowledge, all the things that I have now in order to start my business, right? So I didn't have that right combination of factors to make that decision. For me, the right time was in my 40s. I know people have done it in their 60s or 70s, right? So I think everybody's journey is a little different, and there's no right or wrong. It's like your courage in your 20s is huge, right? Like that's totally different. It's different. So a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't have a family yet, and I have all the." Well, you're still making the commitment at a much, less advanced age than I did, and that kudos to you to say I'm going to go for it at that stage, right?
You could call it courage, you could call it necessity, you know?
Hey, no, whatever it is, I still believe there's a lot to put yourself out there, right? To say I'm going
Yeah.
for it, I'm going to create something.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, thank you for sharing your story with me. Do you want to just share a little more about your book? Maybe show it to everyone that's watching on video and
Yeah,
tell us where we can get a coffee.
yeah, for sure. So my book is called Love Mondays, and the concept is really, as I thought about my 20 years in business and working, there's many people who drag themselves through the week. It's Monday, hump day, they're a little bit more excited. Happy Junior Thursday is Friday, and then by Friday they're good to go, right? And I just don't believe in that way of living. Look, and I've been through many periods where I didn't love what I did. So Love Mondays is a representation of how do we all find more joy, fulfillment in our work life and our the rest of our life, which I think is all one. And it's three sections. One is my journey of how I found that, and I'm still finding that. It's not like I'm jumping out of bed every day, but it's my story. The middle section's how do you help your team love what they do, and the last is 20 what we call Monday Mavericks, and I love you came up with that name of people who have found it. And we've got everyone. We've got a Buddhist monk in there. We've got a teacher. We've got CEOs. So it's people from all walks of life who have found what's right for them. So that's what it is. It's on Amazon. Here it is, bright yellow. So if you go on Amazon, it's called Love Mondays. And you see Dina's name right here.
Yeah, that was
right?
just so kind and generous of you, Ron.
No,
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have brought it to life with you. Absolutely.
No, but maybe I'll look. I honestly feel like if you didn't do a great job like you did, I would not have said let's put it on the front. I'm telling you this like completely honestly. I think you did a masterful job doing it.
Thank you.
And I really mean that. And you know me, I'm very direct, sincere, authentic, like that. I really mean that, and I tell a lot of people it's like it takes a team, right? Because writing a book was my very first time, and I think it might have been your second book you read it, or I think so. But that was very helpful, and that's the reason. And even Paul Barnhurst, my partner, instrumental, right? So it's a lot of people come together for this book.
Absolutely. Well, I highly encourage everyone to take a read. Ron, thanks for joining me today, and to many more storytelling sessions in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adina.
Thanks for listening to Tell Me a Story. Let me know what you think and like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill.